Good morning. Welcome to the Rangers Roost. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I am a screenwriter, a game developer, a Renaissance man. I'm the creator of Jump Rangers, and this is a weekly show, although we did miss last week, where we sit down and start the week by talking about craft, talking about geek culture, talking about whatever's relevant at the time, I guess. Um, And the reason why we missed last week is because I was working on a screenwriting deadline. I had a client who had a meeting with a streaming company and needed basically a new pilot and a new show bible, a show like they had a show they wanted to make, and the show wasn't on paper yet, really, and that's what needed to happen. So um, I broke down some source material, almost 500 pages of it, and more than 500 pages of it actually, and produced uh, a show bible and a script that made everybody very happy inside of about 8 days. I'm feeling good about the work. I write fast. I write very fast, and it's not because I'm not careful with my characters. It's because when your structure is strong and when you understand what story you're telling and when you build a production around the efforts of your characters to accomplish their goals, because actors perform actions, they don't perform reactions. You don't want the story, in other words, to happen to the characters. You want the characters to drive the story through their efforts to accomplish their respective goals. And once you understand what those goals are, and once you understand who the characters are and what they're capable of, what their best efforts look like to a high degree of specificity, the show really does write itself. At that point, you say, okay, what would they do to try and accomplish this goal? Where would their efforts lie? What would their best efforts, if they really dug deep and really put in all the effort that they could? And yes, sometimes that process surprises you, but I've written enough screenplays at this point where even the surprises come pretty quick. And it's just a question of sitting with the characters and doing the work of actually writing what they do to accomplish their goals, and making sure when another character comes into a scene because the protagonist seeks them out because they need their help to accomplish their goal, that that character is doing what they need to be doing to accomplish their goal instead of just reacting to the protagonist. Once you have those mechanics down to the point where you can work with them intuitively, once you're practiced with them to the point where they become tools in your hands and not just concepts that you're struggling with, why would it take forever? What's There's no such thing as writer's block in screenwriting. If you're having writer's block, you're not screenwriting. you're you're writing a novel formatted like a screenplay is the problem that you're having at that point. And that problem is going to manifest itself in other ways other than writer's block. So there's that little thought to start the day off. Anyway, this is sort of my first moment where my brain is my own again. I think part of the reason why I am so efficient is because I really do turn my brain over to the project, and I let my understanding of the tools that I'm using act in service to I I I respond to the need of whatever the product is supposed to accomplish, and I do it in a very, I think, neurodivergent way. And then when it's over, I sort of feel like I'm in an autistic shutdown. I need to recalibrate to the world around me. I'm overwhelmed and overstimulated because I'm no longer in the world that I've been creating. And that's where we are right now. So, all I've really been thinking about lately is screenwriting. And one of the things that was happening over the last, I won't say the last 2 months, but before that, towards the beginning of this year, was Evan Ipiluni, my wife, was encouraging me to start writing a book about how I do what I do. And I did start writing that book, but I haven't had any time to go back to it. And I know that what I wrote is probably pretty basic and straightforward, but I don't remember what it was. And I thought I would take this opportunity to, if nobody showed up in chat, just read a little bit from what I wrote and see what I had to say. To be honest, might not even be that good. We'll find out. I called it "And Action." I have a preface, I have ideas, and I have a chapter on three-act structure, but I didn't apparently start writing that chapter yet. So we read the preface first and just see what it says. If anybody wants to get in on this and pull me off the book, that's fine. But here I am. It's Monday. I'm going to talk about something. Let's talk about screenwriting. Working in film and television is nothing like it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and it's nothing like it was when the cinematic masterpieces we all aspire to make were actually produced. Today's entertainment industry is nothing like the world our media is preparing the next generation of screenwriters to expect. Nevertheless, our industry is heaping more and more responsibilities of leadership, from the expenses of film development to defining our ethics, on people who are just looking for a chance to help build our culture. Why is this happening? For the purposes of this book, it doesn't matter. If you'd like to talk these issues through, please follow me on social media. Maybe there's a book coming on that subject sometime down the road. For now, it's enough to say that it's happening. It's enough to say that it's happening for sure. That it's happening. That indeed it is happening. For now, it's enough to say that indeed it is happening. Edit. Why not? My own background is in classical theater, scene work, and dramaturgy, having studied the ways in which show business thrived in times past and having practiced the habits that earlier generations of show people relied on to weather the risks of stage production and make their shows successful. I came to Hollywood with a perspective on sustainability that many of the producers, execs, and film professionals I've worked with have openly critiqued as old-fashioned and naive. And since then, Hollywood has put me to the test. Without getting into grimy details, I've survived everything from crippling and life-threatening production accidents to egregious cocaine-fueled investment fraud. True. When things are at their worst more than once, I've found myself in positions where people with the power to help, indeed with the obligation to do so, wind up hiding behind flimsy legal arguments that, in spite of their transparent and willful trickery, are sufficient to delay the help I needed long enough to put me on the streets. Twice now I've been homeless while working in Hollywood. My first feature film as an assistant director was shot while I was homeless and living as an assistant director. I don't think that sentence makes any sense. My first feature film as an assistant director was shot while I was homeless and living as a disabled survivor of brain injury. I was. Traumatic brain injury. No matter what my living situation looked like, there hasn't been a year where I didn't get my pages in as a writer. My community hasn't always grown year after year, but it's never failed to grow stronger. My community hasn't always grown in numbers year after year, but it's never failed to grow stronger. As I write this preface, I'm living reasonably well off my income as a script doctor. Altogether, I've written more than 50 screenplays. More than half of those have been sold or optioned or were written as works for hire, although most of those were uncredited page one rewrites. Regardless of what happens next in my life, regardless of what happens next in Hollywood, I know that my craft and my community will support me in my efforts to live well and achieve my goals. My resilience and my adaptability aren't unique to me by any means. My habits as a show person are what's keeping me alive, are what keeps me alive. My old-fashioned way of doing things is paying off. If 5 out of every 7 decisions we make are unconscious, Then I've survived my misfortunes and profited from the opportunity because my habits are strong enough to support me even when there is no reasonable path to success. All of this I've learned as tradition. All of this was passed down from the show people who came before us because all of these challenges, no matter how dire, have been faced countless times before. Also true. Most writers don't know any of this stuff. Nobody teaches you stage smarts as in an English department or in journalism school. For that matter, most of our industry's leadership came from the business world or sales or marketing. Do you think those people ever learned how to treat their cast or their crew or their audience? Did business school teach them how to manage a house or a stage? Part of the problem our industry is facing right now is that the generational knowledge used by show business used to build show business into a global industry is dying out. Instead of relying on the practices that show people have built to support the expansion of our industry from one little theater in Athens, Greece, into a business that touches literally every life on the planet over the last 2 millennia, our leadership is trying to apply a one size fits all system of risk management that's only really existed since the invention of the stock market. In a very real sense, our industry is investing all its energy and brain trust into the hairy process of reinventing the wheel. My goal in writing this book is to help my fellow writers secure their futures as leaders of the industry, both creatively and financially. If the fundamentals of our industry are slipping through our fingers, as I say, then just a little bit of wisdom can make a big difference. If you take anything at all from this book, dear reader, then I think that little bit will serve your success in show business as a writer. Oh, that's decent. I'm not actually crazy about this preface, but it's got its points. Any show, whether that production happens to be a film, a television series, a play, a concert, a stand up comedy set, a circus, or even a sporting event, is betting on the ability of the show people involved to manage two simple risks: that the show will be good and that people will show up. Whether or not the show is good depends almost entirely on the craft of the people performing and producing the event. Whether or not people show up, whether we're talking about the audience, the performers, or anyone else, depends on the level of commitment in the community towards that production. If your craft is strong and if your community is strong, then so long as you're not overextending those resources, where's the problem? Your show will be successful. Your shows will be successful. When they're not, you won't need to think too hard about what happened and how and why. Your next show will put you right back where you need to be, as long as you don't get sloppy with the maintenance of your craft and your community. This book, my plan is to present these elements of success and the habits that support them in a way that makes sense to writers. Screenwriting, for many writers, is about realizing the fantasy of seeing our imaginations come to life all around us. At the same time, every writer has learned to parrot the phrase, show business is a business. Where does dream definitively end, and where does the post-capitalist corporate hellscape begin? Does anyone actually know? Yes, I know where that boundary is, or rather, let me say that neither of these notions of Hollywood paints a useful picture of film production. By learning to write in service to the actors in our films, rather than asking them to sell our ideas to the audience, we create the foundation for film productions that bring the cast and crew together with a unity of purpose. Similarly, by providing our productions with the leadership they need from us, and by empowering our colleagues to do likewise, we can make the filmmaking process as easy and fruitful for everyone involved as possible. Our job as writers is to build the structure that brings everyone else together. If you're ready to step away from the candlelit desk by the window, put down the typewriter or the quill, and get your hands dirty, then I think you'll find this book to be a very exciting read. Are you ready? Seriously, let go of the quill. Come on now, hand it over, just for a little while. I promise you I'll give it back when we're done. Good, thank you. Now you're ready. And with that, lights, camera, and action. Started off a little weak, I think. Despite the fact that I'm sharing all these big facts about my life. That needs to be rewritten, I think. But I'm establishing authority. I understand why I did it. I don't know if I did it as well as I need to. Let's take a look at this second chapter, because that didn't take us too long. Chapter 2. No. Chapter 1. Ideas and action. This is an important concept, actually. Before we talk about all the things writers can do to build their careers in Hollywood, we need to deconstruct a few habits most writers have that will get in their way. Writing something for actors is so fundamentally different from writing for a reader, not just in terms of formatting, pacing, and whatnot, but in terms of how we think about story, that most literary adaptations to film and television never even come close to capturing the magic of the text itself. Making the most of our actors in the medium of film and television means letting go of basic truths that have served to keep our writing sharp and disciplined in the work of literature and journalism. And I'd like to get that cognitive dissonance on the table as early in our relationship as possible. Let's begin with the idea that selling an idea is something that can make a person rich and successful in Hollywood. Our media has gotten very good at selling Cinderella stories about having just the right idea can instantly transmute an amateur career into a media empire. And those Cinderella stories capture people's imagination because they promise a workaround to the work itself. Listen. Let's put a new chapter there, new paragraph. Listen. Marketing execs in particular have a tendency to get excited over ideas as opposed to things like craft, because ideas are what marketing people sell. With that said, no director, producer, actor, or writer is likely to abandon their current career plans because they've been captivated by a novel concept. Why did you start writing? Most of us, if not every last one of us, started writing because we had an idea that seemed too important or compelling to leave unexpressed. Creative craft all comes from the same place, fundamentally. Our imaginations drive us to hone our creative skills until we can communicate our ideas well and thoroughly and eventually with a modicum of grace. As we invest in our craft, ideas start coming more easily. Soon we have more ideas than we have time to develop them. Creativity is a muscle and it grows with exercise. Imagine how many ideas must be floating around Hollywood. Literally every writer, director, producer, designer, actor, and composer has more than enough ideas to keep a studio busy. When people are blown away by the allure of this or that idea, it's almost always a safe assumption that those people aren't actually making movies or television. When we get past the egotistical wounds that come from realizing our inherent value to the industry might not rest so readily in telling everyone else what their creative priorities should be, the lack of a thriving market for ideas in Hollywood is actually pretty liberating. Any idea can yield an excellent piece of cinema or television. What makes that film or show as good as it needs to be is the work going into it, and that work is ultimately what will attract producers, directors, and even representation to your cause. In the end, the most important thing in determining an idea's value to the industry is the extent to which it motivates you. If an idea is so compelling and important to you that it doesn't matter what obstacles are set in your path, then that idea will come to be seen as incredibly valuable because you'll make it work and because people will write a Cinderella story about how you got to be so lucky. While it is true that just about any idea, barring objectively harmful ideas such as those that invoke racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and so on, can make for excellent entertainment or art, there is a structure to how these ideas must be approached if we are going to use them to empower our actors. Some screenplays serve as essentially a benchmark of diminishing returns, where the text itself serves as the ideal version of the story being told. When the actors perform that script, they rob it of perhaps 6% of its perfection. Maybe the director's vision achieves fully 98% of the screenplay's potential, which means we know that we lose another 2% there. Maybe we lose 3% to the cinematographer, and so on. Producing a screenplay like this every single time feels like a losing battle. Inevitably, the finished film winds up feeling like the lesser adaptation of a much superior novel, even if the property was originally written for the screen. Okay. Other scripts offer their actors the tools to build performances on the structure and specifics of the text, compounding the strength of the writing with the strength of their craft. In turn, having those performances in front of the camera empowers the director and the DP to shoot a better film. In post-production, the editor builds on the strength of that footage, and so on. If anything, this book is about how to arrive at a screenplay that empowers your collaborators and what to do with that screenplay once you've got it. To begin with, we need a basic understanding between the differences betwixt. I said between twice. But we have betwixt. Betwixt building a relationship with the reader on the one hand and giving our actors the tools to build a relationship with the audience on the other. Oh, here we go. Here we go. To begin with, we need a basic understanding of the differences between building a relationship with a reader on the one hand and giving our actors the tools to build a relationship with the audience on the other. When we're writing literature, much of our Much of our power to keep the reader turning pages is tied up in the question of what happens next. In film and television, there's a world of difference between an audience that's waiting to see what happens next and an audience that's actually watching. In literature and journalism, great storytelling is an exercise in observation and theme, putting characters into thematically charged situations, letting those situations slowly strip our characters of their layered defenses, allows us to know them through their reactions. Creating tension on the page is basically a question of juxtaposing themes. If a character is dealing with matters of love but also loss, the reader knows the reader knows these two forces will not comfortably coexist on the page. If they want to know what we as writers are planning to do with that imbalance, they have to keep reading. Much as this will sound like a semantic argument, audiences in film and television don't actually want our observations. In the most literal sense, they come to watch. If we don't let them make their own observations, we lose their attention. What I'm saying really is that the most fundamental aspect of good literary structure robs an audience of their engagement. Mad as this sounds, giving our actors the tools they need to connect with an audience means building stories around a narrative spine that's divorced from the things we're trying to observe as writers. But how exactly? What are we writing about if we're not writing about our own ideas and experience? On stage or on screen, great stories are built on the efforts of our characters to achieve goals that are in some way overwhelmingly challenging. In other words, our characters need to drive the story. When our stories are driving the characters and the characters are reacting to the plot, the actor winds up feeling like they're trying to sell the narrative to the audience. Actors perform actions as opposed to reactions. When we write a story that ensnares our characters, as opposed to letting our characters drive their narratives through their efforts to achieve their respective goals, we're essentially asking the actors to make those stories feel credible by reacting appropriately. Using emotion or tone to make an idea feel credible isn't actually acting. Technically, it's modeling. Reactive stories feel like advertising because, structurally speaking, that's exactly what they are. What this means is that when we settle on an idea for a story, the first thing we need to do as writers is define the action that drives the story. Who is the protagonist and what are they doing? Don't tell the story about an oppressive fascist regime. Tell the story of the revolutionary who led their nation out of fascism. Focus on the efforts of the protagonist to achieve their goal, instead of building a set of circumstances for the protagonist to react to. Rather than fixating on how circumstance pushed the protagonist from the beginning of their story to the thrilling conclusion, let it be their responsibility to choose their mission and see that mission through. The protagonist. Let it be the protagonist's responsibility to choose their own mission and see that mission through. If there's a theme or an idea you want to explore through your writing, it's important to give the protagonist a goal that engages that theme through the subtext. If you want to explore the unknown, let your character investigate the unknown. If you want to very carefully dissect the human condition, let your character do some groundbreaking psychological research or attempt to heal from a life-altering trauma. What's important here is that it's the efforts of our characters that draw the audience in. If we use the story itself to support our characters in their success, then our characters don't need to do as much of that work for them. So if we use the story to support our characters in their success, then our characters don't need to do as much of that work for themselves. Letting different elements of the world building or fate or happenstance change the fortunes of our characters may be an opportunity to show the audience more of the world we built for them, and it might be a great opportunity to highlight a theme that was otherwise bound to go unshowcased. But the audience doesn't get to observe our character at their most resourceful or vulnerable. While there's more to see, there's less to watch. Giving actors strong actions to perform is how we empower them in their performances. Instead of thinking of story as something that happens to our characters, screenwriters have to think of it as something characters create for themselves. Given that most screenwriters do come from literature or journalism, most of our ideas are probably scenario driven, designed to take a character out of their comfort zone and force them to reveal something meaningful about themselves. Most of our ideas, in other words, are going to be about sharing our observations about people with the audience. Taking that idea, turning it inside out, and letting all those observations go Letting our characters essentially write their own stories through their efforts to achieve their goals is the key to writing screenplays that spring to life in the hands of a cast and crew. Then I have these sections called acting out the lesson, which is that's what it sounds like. It's like homework. Here's some homework. Let's read the homework. Creativity is a muscle, and giving that muscle plenty of exercise is the key to generate compelling cinematic ideas in command. Once a day, every day, I recommend writing down an idea for a movie. Keep these ideas in a notebook or a journal. Literally, just write one sentence that describes the idea itself, and if you need to, write a second sentence that describes the goal the protagonist is trying to achieve. If that second sentence doesn't make the first sentence obsolete, then you haven't found the action for your story yet. It's true. It's a good point. Your action should, by definition, drive the protagonist to create, confront, explore, investigate, or otherwise engage in some fundamental way the central concept of the film or show. If the idea is that your world would have a very hard time accepting an end to world hunger, for example, the story should very simply be about a scientist trying to implement a solution to world hunger. All the hardships and challenges that complicate an idea like that will very naturally come from the protagonist's own efforts to achieve their goal. Once you've got your two sentences, just close the notebook and put it aside until tomorrow. Doing this exercise shouldn't take longer than a few minutes, so try not to overthink it. In a month's time, you'll have 30 ideas that you could be developing. At least 5 of them will be ideas you feel strongly about. In a year, you'll have a few hundred ideas sitting literally in your back pocket. In time, the value and necessity of any one idea will start to feel less like the key to your overall success. More and more, the focus of your contributions will be on the quality of your work. Just as importantly, you'll be in the habit of coming up with ideas for film and television at a moment's notice. If someone asks you for help with a project of their own, or if someone starts brainstorming in the middle of a pitch meeting, finding ideas that address the needs of their project will come much more easily and naturally to you. If imagination is a muscle, it pays to be the one person in the room who's always going to the gym. Well, actually, it's a good chapter. I don't particularly disagree with anything there. I don't think it's boring to read if you're interested in the subject matter to begin with. Uh, all right. So this week, I have to catch up on the month. I have coverage to write. I have potentially a few screenwriting projects I'm going to be bringing in. My wife and I are going to be heading to her parents' house in Arizona, but I'm bringing the computer, so we'll be streaming. I'm also going to get back to streaming Star Citizen this week. There's a brand new patch. There's a new patch in the PTU. Excitingly, the Invictus Fleet Week is upon us for anybody who's a Star Citizen. There's Alexis reminding me to feed Luna the puppy. She's not a puppy. She's old. She's an old girl, but she's a Chihuahua, so little. Is there anything else to talk about today? I'm proud of the work I did last week. I think it really helped somebody who was worth helping. And I think I helped further a goal that's worth supporting. And I don't want to say any more about it because I don't want to leave any sort of tracks on the internet for people to follow when it comes to my ghostwriting work to figure out what I did and didn't write. But there are a few ghostwriting clients that are becoming bigger relationships in my life. And, at any given point, any one of those relationships could lead to work on Jump Rangers. It could lead to work on other things. I don't want to give people the fuel to speculate, so I try not to talk too much about them. It's enough to say I think I did some really good work. And I like it. It's something I would support. And that feels good. I have ghostwritten things that I wouldn't want any part of. And in a situation like that, it's my job to step in and help the client achieve their goals better than anyone else could help them achieve their goals. If I can't do that, I'm not the right person for the job. But just because I have done it doesn't mean that taking their goals farther needs to be my responsibility. This is one of those projects where I think I would. So that's refreshing, and it feels good that I've done something that was worth doing to me personally. Um, in a way, I guess some of these ghostwriting projects, I guess it's like I'm writing a character. It's my job to become the writer that they need me to be. And if I'm not that writer, the question I have to ask myself is, can I become the writer they need me to be better than anybody else could? And if I can't, then I can't take the job. I need to recommend them to the person who can help. That's kind of how it works. Having mustache imbalance issues. It's driving me crazy. You can't unsee it now, can you? Thank you. Thank you for joining me. It's going to be a good week. We have the rookies later today, which is always a pleasure. And I'm excited to see Buster and Liz. Liz's comic book, if anybody's watching, is on its last day of sales. So if you would like a copy of Alice, please make sure to buy it from the Kickstarter. What else? I think that's it. Rookies later today. I'm getting back on my grind. Although there may be a new job starting and we may have to change some scheduling. We'll see how it all adds up. Hopefully I'm going to be getting Ippy Looney a new computer in the next couple of weeks, and we can get Ippy Looney on some of these streams as well. I think that would be nice. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for supporting Jump Rangers. If anybody wants to find out more about the game, please check out patreon.com/Jump Rangers, and don't be a stranger, Ranger.